Okay, 9 a.m. Let's call the meeting to order. Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Adam Donk,
Present.
Mr. Walker,
Here.
Mr. Becker,
Here.
Mr. Jeff Donk, Ms. Goodman, Ms. Kaminsky, Mr. Picardi.
Here. Can we come back to Miss Goodman?
Ms. Goodman, are you present?
I kind of, yes.
Karen. Approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
George, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Dylan. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Do we have any public comment? Is there any, one from the public online, Barry?
No one that would be commenting, but.
Okay. Seeing no public comment, we will, move down to, Lauren's report. Did we have,
It was that we got last.
okay, very good.
Lauren.
Thank you, Susan. Lauren, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you.
Wonderful. The floor is yours.
Perfect. All right, well, good morning, everybody. First, thank you for allowing me to present remotely. I'll try to make this as quick and painless as possible. I know this is the most exciting part of your day. We issued an unmodified opinion this year, so that is the highest opinion you can receive. That just means that the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects. We also had no findings, which is always the goal, so great job there. A few of the financial highlights. The assets of the airport exceeded its liabilities at the close of the fiscal year by $7,313,332. That's shown as the net position. $106,774 of that is unrestricted net position that the airport can use to meet its ongoing obligations. During the year, the airport received $630,745 in revenues and incurred $901,350 for an overall decrease in net position of $270,605. The general fund actually increased fund balance by $15,662 for an ending fund balance of $106,774. And that is about 19% of the airport's annual expenditures. We typically like to see that number between 15 and 25%, so 19% is pretty comfortable. Not too many changes over the prior year. Let's see. The biggest change would be to the capital grants and contributions. The ARPA funded capital project finished in 2023. So that revenue is down pretty significantly. Besides that, expenses actually decreased slightly by just under $12,000 from the previous year. Not really anything else of importance to note for that. I did want to mention just a few small budget variances. Contracted services was the biggest one. It was over budget by $31,000. Now this, you're not going to receive anything from the state for this just because it's less than 10% of like the overall expenditures. But just something to be aware of for the future. Obviously, it's not always possible to know that an invoice is coming in after the fiscal year end to be able to amend the budget appropriately, but just something to keep an eye on for the future. And that's really all I had. Is there any questions?
Lauren, what were the contracted services that put us over?
I would have to look at the detail from the audit report. It just shows, the total contracted services for the year was $41,871. But the final amended budget was only $10,800.
Barry, do you have some insight on that?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure
Yeah.
what got put into that.
Susan, do you?
I don't, I'd have to go back and run the line.
If you'd like, I can, after the meeting, I can look at the detail, and send an email to Susan, with that information, if that would help.
Can you include me on the email, please?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Well, does anyone have any questions? Okay, Lauren, thank you for your report. It's greatly appreciated. We'll look forward to your email.
All right.
And,
No problem.
Is there a motion to approve?
Make a motion that we
Karen, thank you.
I'll support.
Thank you. Need a roll call vote on this? No? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed?
And just so I'm clear, the motion was to approve the,
Accept the auditor's
Audit.
report
well, the audit.
for the audit? Great. Wonderful. Thank you. All right, moving right along here, and good time, approval of minutes. Is,
I'll move we approve the minutes.
Dylan, thank you. Your second? Oh, wow, all sorts. Cindy will put you on the board. Second by Kaminsky. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Treasurer's report.
Okay.
Susan?
Yep, so you can see your accounts payable for May of 2025, pretty straightforward this month. We did pay corporate flight, which is the contour, and that is the May payment. And they are up to date through May for our payments too.
So how quick are those payments coming through?
This is now, we're actually at where we should be.
Mhm.
So we're getting their invoice on the second or third. We then can pay by the fifth, sixth.
Yeah,
And then the reimbursement takes about 10 to 14 days.
yeah, I would say about 2 weeks.
So we're kind of three weeks into the month, we've been reimbursed and ready to start the next cycle. But, you know, we're still carrying this extra expense for 3 weeks a month.
Which that was anticipated
That
within
is
3 weeks?
anticipated, yes.
Okay.
Trying to figure out how much.
Well, really, it's more than 3 weeks.
Okay.
They have to set that money aside and not use it out of the general fund for the next 3 years. So, I mean, even though it goes out and comes in, the county can't do anything with that money.
Because we have it for a week
Right.
and then it would go.
And then it goes back out.
Yes.
So it's a revolving,
And would you like to share with us the amount of that money?
so it's gonna vary. So in the winter months, it's less. Summer, of course, is gonna be a lot more. So this one's, was
May
almost
was
6.
600,000.
I wanna say June will probably be 800.
July and August would be the most. Well,
Mhm.
July, August, September, October. So it's by number of flights. So May, we had 12 flights a week. Starting mid-June, we get to 14, so
Right.
June is half and half. July through October, so 700, 750,
Mhm.
peak months, 350,
Off-season.
off-season.
Mhm.
And then in between, it's about the 600. So,
And we now have a good relationship and a process, and we know our counterparts at Contour, and, it's running within our expected range.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
Good, so there's no surprises to the
No
county
surprises.
from budget
Mhm.
standpoint, and we're working as planned.
No surprises, but as we continue to talk, it's
an impact.
right.
Right.
Continue to be something that's sitting
Just
over
something
here.
we're aware.
Yeah.
We have a revolving loan with the county for let's say $800,000
Mhm.
that we are constantly tapping into repaying, they need to keep that separate to serve those purposes.
Right. Yeah.
And that might be something that the board would want to actually formalize with some sort of agreement behind this functionality at some point.
Especially as we move towards needing more money.
Okay, let's see, I'm gonna note that by the budget committee,
Mhm.
and we'll have them take that up in the month. So, revolving loan.
It's an idea I've had over the last week as we were working through budget stuff, but in my mind, that is kind of what.
Okay.
'Cause really, like, that should be booked as a liability on
Payable
the
and
airport
receivable.
and receivable, long-term receivable county's book. So that's not taken into consideration yet. So, because it does come in and out, but ultimately it is, we should probably put that on there of 800 or 700 and then, adjust it as we go.
And as we, jumping ahead, as we get into some of the discussions around the budget, some of these other funds that we're looking to essentially borrow from the county to be repaid through grant reimbursements, maybe 12 months later, it's kind of more examples of the same type of finance mechanism, where the airport is
So
funding
basically, it would
these
be like,
things.
due to and due from, so that's how that goes on the county books.
So, a few questions. One, was that called out in our review or audit? As a
No,
recommendation?
because that started as of October 1st, that wasn't anything to do
So
with
that's in the
last
new
year.
fiscal
Yeah.
year?
Yeah.
Okay, too.
So, and we don't do that like every month, that will be something that'll be booked at the end of the fiscal year. So let's say, we pay the September one, but we're definitely not gonna get reimbursed in September, maybe. No.
Because we want to.
So that'll be booked as a due to and due from at the end of the fiscal year. So like when you're looking at the trial balance, you're gonna see now under the liability, a due to the county. So that'll be what that will show up in the books. And then on the county side, it'll be due from. So that's how that will work, so.
That would only, under current mechanisms, only happen once at the end of the year.
Right,
Kind of
right,
all of those
right,
balancing entries get
right.
recorded. During the year, we just flow.
But on that revenue side, you're gonna see a receivable. Kind of.
The offsetting entries.
Yeah, but just so you're aware, when you're looking at those, at the next, and we'll go over that at the end of the year, how that all plays and shows up on the books.
Maybe even before the end of the year.
Well, yeah, but we'll
Okay.
go over it in September.
So, May 2025 accounts payable. Is there anything you'd like to call to our attention on that?
No, just where we were at with the corporate flight management, everything else is pretty standard,
Okay, does the board have any questions on that particular one? Okay, is there a motion to accept the treasurer's report regarding the general fund? Okay.
So moved.
Hey, Dylan, thank you. Second, George, thank you. Roll call on this one?
Mr. Adam Dotz?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Ms. Goodman? Ms. Kaminsky? Mr. Picardi?
Yes.
And
Okay,
just, that was a motion to approve the payables for the month?
Yep.
Okay.
okay, next, B, May 2025 accounts payable fund 481. That was for the general fund, Barry.
Yeah.
A.
Yeah.
I was doing these one at a time.
Okay,
down
then
the
we
list.
should skip the motion on the payables?
No, that
we'll
was-
just add it now, B.
Yeah.
That was for
There's
the general
nothing,
fund.
yeah,
We're
there's,
taking them ABC,
Okay.
there was nothing for Fund 481.
okay? There's no report?
No.
You don't want a motion to approve
No,
it?
there's nothing to approve.
No. Okay. C, May 2025 financial statements, revenue and expense, trial balance.
So, anybody have any question on those? They're pretty straightforward as to where we're at.
Do you have any comment or recommendation for those with bad eyes, small print?
No, the only thing I would, kind of, on the trial balance, that negative cash, that is kind of what the county is fronting. 50,000 of that, we received, but in June, 'cause that was that, April and May payment from Contour. So that's kind of just something to look, 'cause, you know, the county does.
146,000?
Yeah, so the county does front, like, all the bills that are paid and everything, and it's, you know, and then the revenue comes in slower as we pay the bills. So that's just something to keep an eye on. And then my other question, the liquid asset PFC is actually not part of, like, your general fund money that you spend on every day. But the PFC account is actually in its own bank account, totally separate. My question is, with that, I did see, like, on your budget, where we're going to have to front, like, maybe $226,000 for some things. Is that something that part of the PFC could cover, and then when you get it back, put it back into the PFC account?
The funds in that account are available for anything. They could be
Okay.
transferred to general fund tomorrow.
So instead of asking the county to front the full $226,000, we could use some of the PFC money, maybe say like $180,000, and then do a smaller request from the county.
Yes, but I think of it as, even though it's in a separate account, but
Mhm.
it's essentially earmarked for anything. So, to me, it should be transferred to the general fund to
Mhm.
eliminate the first item you talked
Right,
about, that
right.
$146,000 deficit.
Right.
Once you do that,
Well,
then
that'll come down, because that doesn't
yes, it does
include any
come
of,
down, but
it's usually like maybe 40 or 50 at the end of the year, but I'm just saying
Yep.
that money's there in a separate account.
And again, there's no reason it needs to be maintained, and it has to, for the purposes of the PFC, it has to come into a separate account to be recorded,
Mhm.
but because our PFC is for reimbursements of past expenses,
Mhm.
once we receive it, we can allocate it for anything.
Okay.
Just so you understand, the reason we keep bringing this up is that the county is not really in a position to be able to float any more money. You know, we're very concerned about the 200 and some thousand we're talking about. So, this is why I keep bringing it up, this is why she's talking to you about it. It is truly not being recommended. We haven't had a full discussion about it, we've had some emails and discussions, but just so you know, the county itself is gonna be stressed with its additional stuff, so.
I mean, that is like an option, that money is
Yeah.
there, that's why I'm saying that it's there, it's in a separate account, we can pull it out, cover that. Once we get the grant money back, then it'll go back into
So,
the account.
I think the net is about $40,000, so instead of asking for 226, we'd be asking for about 180. Because the two, so
Well,
to Barry's point.
I look at it totally separate, like,
Okay.
that negative cash account, I mean, that's always gonna be in or out. I'll take a look at that, like, in September, October, once we get all those revenues, 'cause we get revenues in, like, November and December for the last fiscal year, so we'll take a look at where your receivables are at to offset some of that negative cash. And then, it definitely won't be 140, I think might be 20 or 30. So that 188,000, which is actually more now, probably maybe around 190 now, could be used instead of asking.
However, and this is getting into later discussion, if, as is being recommended by the budget committee, that we separate our accounts from the county
Mhm.
and hire an outside firm to basically do our financials. We couldn't rely on the county then.
Right.
To be floating this, and
Right.
we would be having to cover it. So it is a blessing of our current arrangement that we can basically, throughout the year, be in the hole. $146,000 is here. At the end of the year, it may be much less than that. Ebbs and flows,
Mhm.
as opposed to having to be in a position where we have to have some means of paying all our bills as they come about.
Well, I think really what I was trying to understand is what the net dollar amount of Susan's suggestion was. Right now, if we were going to ask the county for $200,000, but we followed through on Susan's suggestion, are we asking them then for 180? You know, what,
So,
propose a transfer of funds?
so I would look at the, PFC asset account, and if there's $190,000 in it,
Yep.
I would recommend using the $190,000 and asking the county for $36,000.
Okay, fair enough. And then every month coming to, still ask for our operating shortfall.
Yeah, at the end of the year, we would book that as a due to and due from. Mhm.
Okay.
Just a timing thing.
It's just
No,
a timing thing,
really.
yeah.
I was just trying to fully understand
Yep. Mhm.
Susan's.
And then the PFC account, I mean, there's like 25 or 3,000 that goes in there every month, so that, you know, gets higher and higher.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay. Is there anything else on C, financial statements? Okay. Is there a motion to accept?
Make that motion?
Thank you, Karen. Is there a second?
I'll support.
Thank you, Preston. Clerk?
Mr. Adam Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky?
Yes.
Mr. Picardi?
Yes.
Okay, Executive Committee did not meet. Capital Projects Committee did meet, and it's probably worth taking a few moments to talk about that meeting, because that is where some of our funding is derived from. So Capital Projects Committee could share with us their findings and why they submitted on to the Budget Committee their request. That would be great.
Since we're trying to not do the same all over time for all these capital projects, we sat down with Eden Hunt and tried to get a roadmap maybe for the future and put it all together, and Stephanie helped us and Barry helped us, and we built up that little chart or form or whatever to get some numbers, and then
I do have a,
there we go, yeah.
Great.
just
Something we can.
orientate yourself for year 26, the upcoming year, which is where this is most relevant.
Yeah, so Mead and Hunt gave us a list of a priorities list of what they think is the most important projects to get done. The first one on there would be an extra $50,000 in case we need support from them on the new director position, which is funny, but that's what they put as number one. Number two is the design phase for the taxiway A project. Just the design would be $200,000 is what they budgeted.
190?
200 total, yeah, 200 total, Barry, I think is what they budgeted, but if we had the grant, obviously it,
No, I think it's 190.
is it 190? I'm looking here, maybe it's wrong, but it says 200 here. So, that's what they gave. I think it was 200 from talking to them.
Andrew, since I know you're on here, can you chime in?
Yeah, I'll have to look it up, but I think it might be the 5% match to make up to 200, because 190 with 5% match is 200.
Okay.
Gotcha. Thank you. So the big discussion here was, and obviously I think that was part of our budget, was
Yes.
the faster we can, if we were gonna float the money.
Here's the other 10 is down here and match. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So total 200, gotcha. So yeah, that was the big discussion, was to get the project rolling, we would obviously have to float the money, and then the design phase.
Can you tell us what the project is and why it's important?
So our apron out there is crumbling, and.
Not apron, tech.
Or taxiway, I'm sorry. And the per Berry, every year we come in for, or the FAA comes in for their safety regulation. If it gets to the point where, which happened maybe 10 years ago, Barry, where we'd have to get someone in to do a pave or a scrape and a pave, whatever the process is, it would cost us obviously money up front to the tune of maybe 20, 30,000 year after year to just keep it operational. So floating, or, you know, getting the design going sooner rather than later would maybe save us. Maybe we wouldn't have to do it, but there is the chance that they come and say, this isn't safe, we have to get Elmer's in here and fork out $40,000
So this project, Taxiway Alpha, has been in our plans for 5-6 years already. Because of other priorities and funding shortfalls, it keeps getting pushed back. We're at the point now where pavements are starting to crumble. As Preston mentioned, there was a section probably 10 years ago that had crumbled. It incurred probably a $10,000 cost at that time to have Elmer's come out when they were in the city doing some other projects to just kind of patch an area. Patching and that type of maintenance, that's 100% on us. Projects that are federally funded are 2.5% on us. So we want to use federal dollars to do the project as opposed to patching over a number of years on us, and then having to do the project.
Tear up what you've been patching.
So
Isn't there a redesign with this as well
there,
at the same time?
yes, because that pavement is the former runway, is likely 40 to 50 years old. Design standards have changed. What we're entitled for as far as width is different than what is there, so it's a complete reconstruct as opposed to just repave what's there.
So is this the short runway perpendicular to the long
No,
one?
this is the taxiway.
Oh, right out here in front of the terminal. Good.
It's actually the taxiway parallel to the long runway. F Foxtrot taxiway is also part of this project, which is the one going right out to the runway. So
Okay.
they all.
Right here in front of the
Yeah,
terminal.
yeah.
And that's part of this.
That is also part of this.
And so this is a deferred maintenance, matter.
It's to avoid, us having to do extended maintenance, on this pavement that is just old and needs to be replaced.
And we think that, this money would be, pretty much guaranteed to the extent the federal government continues to fund. We would have enough.
With our
Okay.
$1.2 million, annual, entitlements going forward, we're in the ballpark of being able to cover the funding for this with those funds. That's at this stage when we haven't done design, we haven't got bids. So if, you know, it were to come in $1 million more than right now estimates, then we'd be in a situation where we'd either have to wait another year for us to earn another $1 million in entitlements, or try to get state or other federal funding to make up the difference.
Well, I
The
think,
timeline proposed by Mead and Hunt basically aligns roughly with our anticipated available funding.
what I was really going, my line of questioning was directed to try to measure the risk to the county on us not being able to repay the money we borrowed for the project.
Okay, so then there's a couple things there, and I think, if you don't mind me talking through your report, Preston. So a normal federally funded project, you would start with the plan or the idea. You would secure a grant to get funds to do the design phase. You would then do the design phase. Based on that, you would do bids. You would then secure a grant for the construction phase, et cetera. The way funding right now is working is they're doing basically that funding cycle once a year. So the earliest right now we could get funding to a grant to do the design phase would be towards the end of fiscal year 26, which means the design would then happen in 26, 27. We then get the grant, then have funds to do construction in 28. With this request is to do this up front, we can start that this fall and be going to get funds for grants next spring for the construction, to do the construction in 27. Get the grant in 26 to do construction in 27. It basically cuts a year off of the project. Now, again, that extra year could not be an issue, or it could be a $20,000 extra bill for us to patch crumbling pavement. So that is why Mead and Hunt is recommending we move this forward as we can. But it's also been, we're borrowing essentially $190,000 to shave a year off and reduce risk of an out-of-pocket expense. So those are the trade-offs we're trying to make here.
Okay.
And Andrew, please chime in anytime if I say something wrong.
Cindy, any questions from you on this? Karen? Preston? All right, is there anything else from the Capitol?
Well, I might as well go through all these. So then this 36,000, it's essentially the same type of situation, but this is for the key hanger door replacement, upfronting the design of that so that it could be actually likely executed for a grant next spring, and we could probably actually do construction in the fall of next year, because it's not the same scope of projects that require this. A lot of this work could be done after it starts freezing and getting cold. But without starting now, we would basically not have working doors on our hangers for yet another year. Then,
Can I ask a very basic question?
go right ahead.
Why does it take $36,000 to design a door replacement?
Andrew?
So it's the door replacement itself, but it's also all the tracks, and making sure, just putting the plans together to, be able to work with that and make minor improvements to make sure the doors work. And then there's also the bidding aspect of it.
So does the $36,000 materially get us any closer to a working door, or is that just somebody to put together a scope?
That is designing and bidding the project, and then the contractor will get on board and, start the project.
And then we pay for the door itself.
Right. And the
Thank you.
the anticipated total cost of that project, including the construction, is?
I believe it's around 200,000.
Okay.
On the sheet I'm looking at, construction hangar door replacement was totaled at 350,000, that's without the design.
So that puts the design roughly 10% of the cost.
Yeah. And the last project was the terminal building study. Just a study was budgeted at $90,000 per year, 27.
And the budget committee discussed this, because Mead Hunt had this on the list of things we could do right now. Budget committee felt with everything else, that was going well beyond what we could stomach. So we pushed that out, a year. That's why it's falling into fiscal year 27. And so what's driving that? So if you'll recall, back in January, I think it probably was, we had the opportunity to try to push that project forward this year in hopes of trying to get the final year of bill funding that was allocated to terminals. It was felt at that time that the risk of that might be too great. And actually, in hindsight, I think that was probably an accurate assessment, since there's a lot of discussion right now that that final year of bill funding is never going to be released under the current administration. And we had run the risk that we would invest in the design and that funding would go away. We'd then have to restart that project down the road, and we'd run the risk that our design would no longer be considered relevant to that project that might ultimately get funded 4 or 5 years from now, and we'd have to redo the design and never get reimbursed for those costs we did now. So there was higher risk there of not getting reimbursed because of some of those situations. This is envisioning us just starting this project in a normal process, doing design work, but because it's a terminal and the FAA requirements, before you can even do design, you have to justify the project, which is what a terminal study is. And that has to be locally funded. There is no option of waiting for a grant to do that. The needs are the same, and, you know, we're starting to see it now with the fact that we now have a rental car, or now, will soon have a rental car company, and we have no place for them. Contour is making do, but they're going to have employees here with no place to sit, so their employees are probably going to sit in this conference room. This terminal envelope wasn't designed.
Sit for taking a break.
No, sit for, this will be essentially their office, because there's no place for them to, there's not a customer sitting at the counter, there's no place for them to be.
Their office over on the end of the big
You mean the glassed-in office?
Yeah,
That's Contour's office,
so you're talking about, okay.
Enterprise.
and then having an office.
yes. Depending on how the airport director FBO goes, you're short an office for 2 entities, where right now one office houses both. Currently, Orchard Beach rents the office, so technically you have no office for your airport director. We have no baggage return. There are all sorts of things that, with growth, we are at kind of capacity for what the design was. It makes sense that we need to start planning a project that's going to be probably 5 years in the making to rectify those issues.
So that study is putting what you just described in 5 minutes into a 100-page document that we
So
can
that the
present to get a
FAA,
grant.
so that the FAA will say,
Okay.
yes, we understand why you're asking for money.
Okay.
Yep. But
But that
isn't
doesn't,
something
that
has
doesn't come with a terminal plan. It just says you need a bigger terminal, figure out
When you say plan, do you mean?
Andrew,
blueprint.
you know, I don't know if you can answer Dylan's question, but, I mean, I don't know how much preliminary planning goes into a terminal study to flush out versus just the needs analysis. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, I would have to get back to you on that. I don't know, what is all included in a terminal study.
But it is not a design.
No, it is not the full design. Um,
Is it a needs assessment?
That is its general purpose. I don't know how detailed it gets.
Well, we'll deal with that and the scope of work relating thereto in the next budget year.
Yeah, but that's why it was discussed at the committee, it was moved out, it could be moved out further, it's just, you know, where it is right now on the schedule. As we look down the fiscal year 26 column, the things below are local match, are 2.5% on projects that are anticipated to be, completed within the year. So that's a total of 24,200. And then the one item that we didn't talk about yet, and this was not discussed in the budget committee, or not budget, the capital projects committee meeting, because both Stephanie Ward and myself forgot about this, at that time. But our current PFC, we talked about that earlier in the financials, that application and PFC project that was approved, which allows us to capture $4.50 for each passenger, boarding here. That was originally done in 2007, and the way a PFC works is you put in an application, collect essentially that fee up to a certain total dollar amount. Given where we are going to expire our capability of further collecting PFCs sometime early next year. Depends on the number of passengers we have between now and the exact time. So either, if we do nothing, that our ability to collect that funding will cease, and we will have $50,000 a year less revenue going forward, or we need to close out, manage the current PFC, put in a new application, get it approved by the FAA, and get it authorized so that we can continue to collect those funds after our current one expires next year. Mead and Hunt, well, going back a little bit, the firm that we originally used to do our PFC 20 years ago, Primary Airport Services, no longer exists. They stopped operating second half of last year. And so therefore we need someone new to do this process for us. Mead and Hunt has been taking over this responsibility for their airports and probably some others as well. So they've built up kind of an internal practice around this. And they quoted us $40,000 for 2 years to both go through the application, close out the existing, and manage the project. Roughly, most of that work is front-loaded, $30,000 the first year, $10,000 the second year. Thus, what's shown there on that, in that spreadsheet. So that's where that $30,000 comes from. Without it, we basically will lose $50,000 of revenue.
Is that something we can get done over the course of the next year, or is that something we need to start on earlier?
Would probably need to start it, sooner rather than later.
I don't know what that
You're-
means,
No,
sooner rather than later.
well, you're dealing with the FAA approving something, so that is always an unknown time frame. So if you wait until the last minute and then they decide it's gonna take them 6 months to approve, you're now not collecting for 6 months while you're waiting for them to approve.
Let's assume it's gonna take them 6 months.
Yep.
Let's assume we don't wanna be in arrears of money we're due from them.
Yep.
By when do we need to engage the consultant so that our application is filed on the first day available to us?
I have not had that conversation with Lead and Hunt as to a recommended start date on this yet.
Andrew, you got anything?
He doesn't know.
This is not his area, so.
Yeah, that is not my area, so I
Can you
would
get
not
back
know.
with us on that?
Yep.
Thanks. All right.
Okay, so that's a description of what transpired in the Capital Projects Committee. These numbers then were sent to the Budget Committee for incorporation into the draft budget.
So one last thing I will say, when we were talking about this, if we do keep growing our employments and become a primary airport, then all these projects would have to be, we've talked about it before, but they'd have to be fronted by us and wouldn't be reimbursed until it's totally complete. Is that,
I'm not exactly sure of how the mechanism changes,
okay?
but right now, as a non-primary airport, all of the funds flow through the state. So all contractors get paid by the state. Basically, we at the end just are asked to contribute our local match.
Mhm.
As a primary airport, the airport becomes much more responsible for paying contractors and flowing those funds. So I don't know exactly how it is different, because I've only experienced what we do. But it does become different, and we do have kind of a responsibility then of fronting expenditures to then get reimbursed directly from the FAA for those under these grants.
Is there a possibility, is there a likelihood of us becoming a primary airport in this budget year?
No,
Okay.
because
So
2026 is based on calendar year 24 numbers.
okay. All right, so
We did not have 10,000 claimants last year. 2026, we will not be primary. 2027, it's a possibility.
great. Anything else from the capital? Thanks for meeting. I think we're about 2 months ahead of last year's schedule, so.
Can I just make sure I'm tracking right, Adam? So we got this capital schedule, been incorporated into the budget. At the county level, we've gotten our eyes on it. And so the heartburn is coming from these, like fiscal year 26, $306,000 local float or local loan.
In some ways, yes. Again, it is the float piece of it
Just the float piece.
makes it difficult for our cash flow.
Would it be easier if we asked for you just to write us the check and
No.
not give it
wouldn't-
back?
It wouldn't
I'm
be,
just,
I think,
No,
Basic question.
I think it's important to do what talked about, is taking that 180-some thousand, or 190-some thousand, bring that down, and then, again, this is only my conversations and what I've
Yep.
done in emails. It's not all commissioners, they would have the final vote on it.
Yep.
Means, but anything you can do to reduce that stress on our finances, that's great.
Okay.
Because we just got done with, what, 20-some thousand also, another little, our last meeting, what did we approve for the county to pick up? I can't recall.
Susan,
Was it the
do you
big
recall what we
excavation
approved?
project?
Maybe it was 20-some thousand, I thought.
No, the revenue sharing paid for the boiler, that was 20-some thousand.
Yeah, that was 28, that's what, 28,000. I
We
think
got a
that's what it
grant
was,
for
yeah.
revenue sharing,
Right.
so
Yeah.
we would not have.
Just,
I'm,
So you
I'm
know.
understanding.
yeah, that float is gonna cost, it's going to strain
Because it's on top of
500 and, yeah,
600 to
600,000.
800,000 that
Right.
were already
Yeah.
required.
But if we can't float it, we can't do these projects, and
The question, Dylan,
the
becomes,
taxiway's gonna
is it
crumble.
easier for the county to float it now or next year?
Okay,
They can either pay us now, pay us later, or decide they don't have the money to do it, and then the taxiway crumbles. But those are the three options, this year,
Or
next year.
we could go out for special terms.
Yeah.
You know, there are other
Yeah.
financing mechanisms, but those
Okay.
are costly. So, whereas the county has had very generous terms of 0 interest.
Cindy?
Yeah, so I just had a quick question here. So out of this $306,000 that we're talking about needing floating money, what is being reimbursed in the end? And what are we totally stuck for?
So,
Okay.
I've switched over to the draft budget, so this line item is really what's being talked about. It's a $226,000, and it all would be reimbursed. And, you know, I struggle to say things like, it will be reimbursed. It's a 99.9% chance it will be reimbursed.
Timeframes, you don't always.
It is anticipated that it would be reimbursed in the following fiscal year, so a 12-month float. That is more likely what would slip than it never being reimbursed. But it's the 226, which, going back to this one,
Right.
that is these two. It is moving the design forward ASAP on these two projects so that we don't delay their implementation by a year. So that is the trade-off.
And then the 80 gets rolled in the budget also.
The 80 is in the budget in other line items, yes.
That's part of the package.
But those are not reimbursed. Those are expenses.
Okay, so now on to the draft budget.
Well, is that the,
I think that's the answer to.
Yeah.
no, is it, but I guess, are we going down the agenda? So is budget committee next?
Mhm.
It is,
Okay.
Steve, Charlie. Budget committee.
So, I don't know, Adam, do you want to walk through this? Do you want me to, I guess I'll just start off by saying, you see these in-out numbers. Ultimately, the budget would have a line there that's 6.8 million, air service grant, and then on the expenses and out, that's 6.8 million. When you include those numbers, they skew everything because, you know, when you've got a 8 million total, a $10,000 difference seems like nothing, but when you take those big things out, you know, $10,000 makes a difference, because 10,000 more from the county basket. So I didn't plug those in because I just wanted to keep it simpler, but ultimately, our final budget will need some of that information.
So I think the most concise way to address, the change in possible proposed budget is, if you scroll down here a little bit, Eric. Okay, fair enough. So transfer in general fund, 150 to 300,000. Our, that's $150,000, potential increase in general operations. And, really what that's attributed to, is the following. One, right now, I think we have a contract with an airport director, or what's your number, Barry? 55,000? Service director, okay. And we have, right now, a posting, of 85,000, so there's a $30,000 range, up to 115,000, on a range for a director.
That, if I can interrupt for just a second, that does include everything as far as benefits and taxes and...
No, there's another line for that in this budget for benefits.
But if you're trying to,
being-
Director all of a sudden.
Well, we don't, Cindy, we really don't know if it is or isn't. I think when we look around at other airports, we see, directors in that range of airports in our peer group. I'm not talking Grand Rapids, I mean, Traverse City's of that. For smaller EAS airports, $100,000 market rate.
and I think going down the path of that before and after, the before, that 55,000 is as a contractor, so no benefits, no employer payroll taxes. I mean, it's just a one-off 55 a year. Now to essentially employee, so base salary, like, Social Security, workers' comp, all of those taxes and fees, plus then whatever benefits the board ultimately decides to provide for its employees. So it's more than a 2-to-1 based on the before and after in that scenario, given anticipation of what it's going to take as a base salary to attract a qualified candidate.
There was a column in here, Barry, that showed that gave us a number of year-over-year change, like column E would have said 150,000 in line 31.
Yep, that's not in this final version.
It just makes it tough for me because, you know, really I can take $150,000 overage year over year and say that really falls in 3 or 4 places. One, it's, if you are at $55,000 contract right now with no benefits for a director, we assume, a maximum of 115. 55, 50's 100, that's 65,000 of 150 right there. Then this D budget, makes the assumption, which says without FBO, that makes the assumption that, we would have 3 individuals on staff becoming airport authority employees, getting a W-2 wage, not from the county of Manistee, but from the airport authority. So, that assumed, $60,000, for one, 60 for another, 65 for a third, 2 part-time people at $7,500 each per summer.
Your notes actually said 4 people, but.
And, right, in a fourth, new person that we would bring on to staff, I think.
Transition employee.
Yeah, well, go ahead, Barry.
I mean, if you look at Mead and Hunt's study, our staffing level is probably too lean to manage this airport going forward. It's less than our peers, and as we grow, it's not sustainable. So that is looking at essentially, as we're kind of dividing responsibilities a little bit, adding a head instead of the airport manager being the manager of every employee, kind of a in-between manager that is overseeing, day-to-day staff and providing backup.
Well, why would you do that?
Do what?
A mid-manager. I mean,
Because,
it's only an employment of 5 people with the director.
because the responsibilities of a director are full-time jobs. You also want them to manage, they're not gonna be able to manage the airport well.
Maybe not, you know, I think the thought was, in the case of, we don't have an FTO and we operate with 40 employees, I would assume you have a crew of the same number and you bring on one person additional. Okay. I think your staff presently is aging out to retirement. So I also think it's not prudent. I think that if you go out and you hire a new guy, he's gonna be a lifelong employee and the best guy ever, versus hiring out of the gate. So I think it would be good if we added one. We're able to groom somebody, or when one of our aging employees either retires, has a health issue, we're running, as Barry just said, we're running.
I get that, we are running lean. I guess I'm putting it in a parallel what we're doing over at the Housing Commission. You know, I need a new administrator, I need somebody as the director. We have a consultant helping, but to manage the day-to-day operation, I want to get a middle management, maybe an office manager or something that is not.
It was never in my mind that there would be a middle manager. In my mind, the airport director
That's
would
what I thought I heard.
oversee everybody here.
When we were talking middle manager, were we talking about assistant, are we still considering assistant director position?
You know, whatever we want to label the position,
Well,
whether it's office
When we
manager.
label, there's also pay scales.
Okay.
Assistant, office manager.
I think this budget shows $50,000.
Down to line item 46, please.
Mostly focusing on the expense side, so.
I just want to be careful about, because again, legacy costs, you know,
So there's no pension, Karen.
I get it,
There's no legacy cost.
but there are benefits, right?
Well, but that terminates upon conclusion of employment.
But I think, so, a conversation that is appropriate is, how are these people employed?
Right,
Um,
how are they gonna be?
So
I said
Adam is
earlier.
proposing that the
Never
airport,
a county employee.
that the airport authority is the employer, and the airport figures out how to do benefits and all of those things, and does not rely on the county for any of this. That is,
Good, but also cost.
Well, there's a cost.
it
There's a
could
cost
actually
to
cost
Susan.
less.
Well, there is,
The
but
county
it's,
could fill us out for Susan.
but you're talking a higher
know.
cost
No,
instead of a built-in cost.
I said could. There's a value to your time.
well, I understand that, but that's part of my job, that's part of my contract when I got hired into the county, is that is built in to my job description, that I am the treasurer for the airport, so there's no additional cost.
Just, again, I debate forever, but I don't want to debate. I just want to lay it out there. Titles mean a lot, and we have to remember about, it's not just pensions, legacy costs are other things. It is, you know, the reimbursement, the insurance. I mean, these are all, with every year that goes up, it, you know, and good luck if you're gonna try to find somebody who won't sign up for a pension these days.
Well, I mean, we've got a crew out here that, Barry, do they have a pension?
No.
Well, I know the crew too. There's other things they have.
Sure. I think this. When I think of a legacy cost, I think of a cost that continues after termination of employment. when I think of a benefit, I think of a benefit being provided while one's employed. I guess regardless of how we want to label them, I think the takeaways are, the net is one new employee or role. Right?
So would your director or assistant then do their payroll and benefits? Like,
Yeah.
they do that?
And this budget contemplates, accounting firm to do our,
And so then
receivables,
you've gotta make sure
payables.
that the money's in the account to cover that, if you're gonna totally separate from Manistee County, right? You're gonna have your own account, your own checking account, and everything else. So, how's that gonna work when, like, a lot of it's front-loaded?
well, we would look at, either a lump sum or a quarterly disbursement. And I think it would force us to get better, all of us, at looking down the road at cash flow. Right now, I don't know how far down the road we look at cash flow. We just, whenever we're in the negative, we click a button, we make it positive. Is that what we do?
Well, I mean,
Internal
ultimately, the county's responsible for the airport, I mean, so,
Well, really, I think,
The county out of it.
right, yeah, they wanna take the county all the way out of it.
well, I think the county, as I listen to the county, the airport creates stress on the county's budget. Right? That's
No,
what,
that is not what I was saying. The county recognizes that the airport has a
Huge
important
benefit,
piece, yeah,
exactly.
to our community. And just like we are 100% behind the jail, you know, we're 100% behind the airport. What I am saying, though, is that as we move towards, we're floating $600,000 to $800,000. There's another couple $100,000 that we should float for another year possibly. So you're getting up in the millions, you know, it's like, it just drains our cash flow. That's the only thing that nobody's saying, and this is just me, you got other people. Nobody's saying it's a strain on, it's something we're not,
It's just
Supportive
something the
of-
county has to be aware of
yes.
and plan for, and
There are other entities that need some things, you know,
well,
like,
and that's really the whole
police
point of
department.
this,
Roads, bridges.
that's the whole point of this discussion, is to really look at these numbers and try to do cash management. And I think really, this authority should aspire to running as close to a balanced budget as possible.
Correct, which, you know, I kind of look back and go, okay, so 2026, we're still moving up, we're only operating on the numbers of 24, so it wouldn't be till 27 that we would have more funding levels coming in, and possibly 27 where we're hiring additional. I haven't been in that piece of it, so I'm not sure. Again, this is all if we go to this model. You know, as you add people in, today, we're making it. Next year, it would be stressful. I mean, I don't know, as you add staff on, I always have a 5-year plan. When I'm growing something, I know when I'm gonna implement those staff.
Well, so just in operation, let's parse out and really quantify and clarify the year over year. 226 is for infrastructure, and it's a reimbursable.
Mhm.
So what $150,000 of operating overage shows is a new director that I think we, at least I would say, in the marketplace, we have gotten extreme value, have a director at $55,000 a year. So that adds, it brings us up to current market rate And we'll decide after we interview whether we wanna pay somebody 85, 95, 105. That's for a discussion based on the quality of the candidate and what our budget is. But there's a $50,000 approximate increase year over year. Back to a 5-year plan, I think that's very wise, Karen. And, in my opinion, and based on what we've seen from the Mead and Hunt review, we run anywhere from 3 to 6 people under staff of our airports and our peer group. So the $150,000 overage provides for another crew staff, one more crew staff is included in that $150,000 overage. And their benefits or legacy costs are included in that. And we will still be operating under staff of our peer group after that position.
I just operate differently. I would probably make the decision on who's coming in. That person is gonna be very important to kind of give me some information as to what he or she wants in this. I mean, I went from 80 to 122 employees. Now, I did that over a period of time, not just by myself. I can put a placeholder of saying, here's another $1 million off to the side for additional employees, or what you have to build. So that the person that I hired came in and built it. So I don't mind putting a placeholder out there.
Well, and that's really, I think, what this is. I think if we, presumably, we will be, the county will be considerably down its budget process, and being in, public comment of it, which really the budget doesn't change when we go to a 30-day reading in August. And so what we've tried to do here is put a framework in place to essentially say if the new director finds that we should have one new guy out in the field, we've budgeted for it. I mean, really, I would break it out into 2 buckets: operating cost and the loan for a capital improvement. And it's $150,000 additional in operating when we've held steady for a number of years.
I think a couple other things I'll just try to get big picture understood is, one thing that hasn't been mentioned in this is, this budget has 2 columns. One is we're switching the operating model of the airport to have all employees be airport and or county employees. This is envisioning airport employees versus contracting that out. So that's an apples and oranges difference. The second column is, if we had an airport director that was airport employee, and we still contracted out operations and had an FBO. The problem with that is we're in the middle of an RFP process for that, so we don't know what that might cost. As Adam is talking to, there's a timeline with the county budget process, which means they need a draft now for their planning purposes. We don't know who our airport director will be. We don't know what they're going to cost. We don't know exactly what that employee model might look like, but we've got to put together very rough draft at this point that provides some guidance, because we can't, in my opinion, and I think Adam would certainly agree with this, we can't go to the county now and say, well, we don't know, and then 2 months from now, oh, we need $200,000 more after you've done all of your planning. So is this a worst case? No. Is it the most optimistic of what it could be? No. It's kind of a best guess,
I think
given
it's
what we
responsible.
know.
Yes, responsible guy.
So, like, when would either one of those take effect? Is it gonna be October first, November, December, January, like when?
The job posting for airport director anticipates a start date of September first, so that there's a month overlap with my contract. That could switch.
'Cause you're supposed to be done,
My current contract ends in
September 30th.
September. Doesn't mean that I'm not available.
right, I get you.
You need more time on that.
So
But
that-
that's kind of that.
So what about the other
FBO
side of it?
is the same thing.
Okay.
Current Orchard Beach contract expires at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay,
If everything comes together, and that is the direction that goes, a new one could start October first. Things don't align with that, then adjustments would have to be made. But it's roughly a changeover around the beginning of the new fiscal year, which is what this has been kind of trying to anticipate. The only thing that we can sort of predict right now are if the airport employs people, that model, because it doesn't rely on this RFP process
Right.
where others are
Right.
submitting.
right,
So that's the only one that is really flushed out,
okay.
which is this option number one.
Mhm.
But because you're changing models, there are startup costs. So there's two lines here that total $100,000 that are mostly one-time expenses. If the airport's starting to sell its own fuel, you need 2 tanks of fuel to start selling. That's $50,000 to $70,000 of cost of goods upfront. On the equipment side, if Orchard Beach leaves, the tugs, the crew cars, the golf carts, and a variety of other smaller equipment disappears and needs to be replaced. Again, that's more of a one-time thing. So there are a lot of things that come as a transition that are more one-time things that tie into making the budget balanced, that don't happen if the status quo is changed. And that's partly why this, even though in the second option with the FBO, there's a big question mark here as to what that contract might be, the other numbers mostly can be figured out. So you can kind of see, so for example, that 100,000, that doesn't exist under this column because it's the FBO's responsibility to provide those things. Now, ultimately, the airport is probably paying for that, it's just paying for it through the term of the contract with the FBO as opposed to upfront, but it's still, they're very different. So there's a lot of fluidity in all of this process because of where we are in our process and where the county is in its budget process. So we're doing, whatever Adam just said, I thought was a good comment. It's prudent or reasonable. I mean, we're not trying to, worst case, best case, but something that we think is realistic for planning purposes. So with all of that, I'll turn it back over to the committee and the board.
Well, I think this. Even with the proposed budget, relative to our peer group, this airport would still operate for less and have less staff, whether they're contracted staff through an FBO or whether they're airport authority employees. The net operating cost of this facility would still be less than Muskegon, Houston, Alpena, Chippewa County. It would still be the leanest run EAS airport in the region. So we can, and we should, continue to discuss it and look at ways where we can endeavor to really operate in the black. If that's a stated goal of ours, is to run as close to a balanced budget as we can, I think is a good thing. That's consensus is we would aspire to that. You know, we can take a second look at it and, see where we can go, but I think we've worked hard to still operate more efficiently than any AS airport.
I would ask if anybody's got an idea of what a better number in there looks like, that you come up with it, send it to the group, so that we can, or maybe you have a
I think
different
that
vision for the future, that,
It's okay for a placeholder, it's okay, so we can submit the budget. That might not be what I approve one, or would agree to, maybe after we get to that point.
Yep.
We're not even there.
right,
But as a placeholder, I'd agree to that.
okay.
But as a design, that we will know better,
So,
that's my difference.
when do you think you're going to submit this to the county?
Well, we could, in theory, vote on it today.
Mhm.
Submit it to
So, you need to have the AES numbers in there.
You don't want just the
No,
net,
no.
you want the full.
And the federal. And with a fund budget, you have to have the same amount of expenses as revenues. You cannot have a gain or loss. It has to be zero, yes. So, however you wanna work those numbers, so that is how that is. But, if you're gonna approve it today, you really need one that has those full dollar amounts when you're approving the budget. Or like, not really approving it, but
Approving the
recommending this, yes, the draft, to move it forward, to submit it to the county, because we're gonna start looking at, everything this week. Like, we're going through all the numbers and taking a look at everything, so.
So, for the two in-outs, the AES contract amount number, we know what that is, so that, and it is an in and out, so that can be plugged in. The, capital projects, I will use Mead and Hunt's, estimated numbers from their spreadsheet to plug it in. Again, it's an in and out. The only question then I think for the board is, currently, this shows $12,608 of gain. So to accomplish that third goal, if that needs to be zero, we
And-
need to either subtract $12,208 from an income, or add it somewhere in the expense.
Well, you're gonna
make
need
that
to
zero.
add in the drain, because there's still another year of that.
So that's,
I thought we were in our last year now.
No, there's one more year.
well, then,
I can double check, but I think there's one more year. Yeah, I think there's one more year. I think next year we're done. I know we were done with the two other ones, but I'm pretty sure the drain was one more year. When I looked at that on the liability on our books, I think there's one more year of that.
so then that's $8,469. I guess my recommendation would be to just add that onto the capital equipment for now, and not change other things. Again,
So,
there's so much,
we don't have any type of IT, I mean, again, thinking of a cost of an employee, you cost out the space that they're using, you cost out the telephone service, you cost out the IT services. None of that happens here.
this line item is putting some money towards IT stuff, websites, internet, whether it's enough, I don't know.
There's where I would add the money.
Okay.
If we grow, we need more. I mean,
So make that 12,469 No, not that cell. Undo.
I was in the wrong line.
Susan, is that the zero you want down there at the bottom?
Yep, that looks great. Thanks,
Perfect.
Abby.
Man,
And then I can plug in.
numbers are easy to work with.
I can plug in the other ones based on those sources. Everything else would be submitted as,
And
Well-
if you go with without the FBO, let's say that's what you go with and it gets approved, and then you end up going with the number 2, we can do line item adjustments, because you're not changing those dollar amounts.
So then, the question is, Barry, do we submit a budget request at 1201,558 and delete the title from the top heading? We don't know if we're gonna have an FBO or if they're gonna be authority employees.
I mean,
We don't know, but, you know,
at this point,
the
this
county
is,
just wants a number.
Right.
this is the only one we
Fund the number
can,
or not.
Right,
this is the only one we can submit.
Right.
The other one is there, we don't know
Right.
if it's reasonable or not,
right.
but it's just to present how things shift around depending on the two models.
In my opinion, it was meant to be a fallback, so that we would have a budget number on which we could operate the airport in a worst-case scenario, so to speak. We don't know where FBO bids are gonna come in.
My understanding is that the authority, since it went out for an RFP for airport operator and fixed-based operator, that is a model it desires. We just don't have the information from that process to submit a budget, so therefore, we're presenting an alternative fallback.
What I said all along, while Mead and Hunt was writing its report, I said, personally, it's impossible for me to say that I desire an FBO or I don't, because I don't know what the cost of the FBO is. If the FBO comes in, submits a contract for $1 million, I don't desire an FBO, because we can run it for a lot less. So, that was.
With fewer services, so those are those.
Yes, and then we assign a value
Yep,
to
that's what the
sightseeing
yeah,
tours and, you know, the
Things
power
that-
out there and all those sort of things, but, you know, to me, we just didn't know because we didn't have enough information to make a value judgment. We didn't have all the costs.
And we, even on the other one, we still don't know, because are we going to be successful in a vision of these all being airport employees, independent of county HR and county administration, or not? And if that doesn't work, then how does that change the cost structure and the models? And, you know, there's
A lot of more unknowns than known.
to occur this summer, but now
No.
I will mention that the job description put out for the airport director did not anticipate him managing
Employees, HR.
employees and all of that. So when we go through that interview process, we may have to clarify that with candidates so that they're not expecting one thing and.
Well, I will share with the group that submittals have been very strong. I don't have an exact number, but.
15.
Great. You know, to me, that's encouraging. Okay, so it looks like a 1201,558
No, you gotta have the other numbers in there.
plus the EAS, in and out.
And the other federal grants in and out.
Right. Do we have support to adopt that after those inclusions are made and submit to the county?
Don't use the word adopt.
Yeah. I would recommend that we make the adjustment to the budget to submit it for review, a draft for review at for the county.
Yes. Can we make that a motion, Karen?
I did.
Okay, wonderful.
I'll support that motion.
Okay. When Dylan comes back, we can get his, yes, thank you, Cindy.
Put it together, I think he's a yay.
I told Lindsay, I wanted your shirt and jacket, by the way.
Cindy's.
Oh.
Really?
They would go with any of my colored pants that I have.
Might as well overweight.
Yeah.
Just that?
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, it went to my,
Okay, Dylan's back.
Okay,
Sorry, folks.
so there is a motion by Karen and a second by Preston. Why don't we do a roll call on that?
For approving the budget,
Yep. A draft
draft
to be
budget.
forwarded to the county for their review.
Mr. Adamdown?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky?
yes.
Mr. Picardi?
Yes.
Okay. Bylaws committee, is there any report
No, we kind of said it was good to go.
without change?
Yeah.
Well,
I think the
That
only,
one,
there is that one
Yeah.
change, so, I don't know, do you want me to just put that together in Word and bring it to the board next month?
Sure.
That'd be great.
on the open meetings, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
that was only a couple of.
Okay, car rental committee. Barry and I maybe can each share in that report. Enterprise has signed an agreement with Contour to, in the interim, use Contour staff to do check-in and check-out. Roger Stewart indicates that Enterprise should be up and running before 4th of July, next 10 days to 2 weeks. They also have had a number of applicants for the posting locally. It's not a long-term that Contour's team would be checking people in and out. It's to get them up and running here before the 4th of July. They've identified a new assistant manager for the Cadillac office, who's out of Ludington, and so I think the bottom line is they're making progress on permanent staffing, applicants here, interim staffing through Contour, and hope to be functional, for the Independence Day holiday. But what do you know in addition to that?
I've got boxes of computers and IT stuff sitting in my office. I've met with the Cadillac manager who will be overseeing this. It's kind of a subsidiary right now. And it's just getting staffed was their bottleneck of actually starting. The Contour agreement kind of gives a bridge to that. This Ludington-based person, won't be, I think he's starting by the end of this month, but then he's initially going through training, so he's not available here until sometime in July. So there's just this window that they want to be up and running and just need some temporary help to do that, and they've solved that. So the last I heard was they anticipate turning on the ability to make reservations later this week. They will actually have the start date of those reservations available from prior to Fourth of July.
Well, you know, I would say this to the group. In less than a year, we've gotten jet service. We've secured an agreement with a national rental car company, working through a transition on director and FBO. We have a marketing plan that is working. Ridership is increasing. We've got a program that we're about to kick off this Friday. We've got the Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development and Tourism and the airline and the airport authority that has all come together to make it work. I think in the last 7 or 8 months, all the folks at this table have really made a Herculean effort to check a lot of boxes that were goals of this body. You, I think, have been trying for a long time to get a national car rental. That was a linchpin so people could have transportation when they got to town. You know, weight and balance issues aren't an issue with contour and golf clubs and downhill skis and that sort of thing. Not that it's not been without growing pains, but I don't know anything of significance, greatness that was executed flawlessly on its first time. So I'm real pleased with the progress, work that everybody's put in, and the results that are coming from it. So thank you to everyone here at this table and to our partners in Contour and Enterprise. I'll announce that 11:45 this Friday, we'll have representatives from Contour and Enterprise, our board, the chamber, kick off our gift card program. Is our plan right now. Congressman Molinar's office will be represented by his district chief of staff, Ashton Schwartz, so she'll be here for that. And I'd welcome you all to mark your calendar if you can be here at the airport at 11:45 for that. I'm working with the congressman's office to ensure that TV coverage will be here. We're testing 7 and 4 and 9 and 10 news is down here. And hopefully, unless we hear otherwise, we can announce Enterprises opening at that time as well. So I think those are all things in which we can take pride and are positive for the community. Barry, what am I missing there on that? Okay. Transition committee, good, glad that's on here. Let's set a, let's take our transition committee, touched on that, I think we'll certainly have reason to meet. So, the applications are due here on June 30. And you folks meet on maybe July 2, 3? Transition committee, July 2 or 3? For anyone? Lindsay, you wanna remind us,
Who's on it?
who's on it?
Bit of-
I can meet on the 2nd in the afternoon. I prefer really not to meet on the 3rd.
Okay, so 2 p.m., 1 p.m.?
July 2nd?
What time's that plane arrive, Barry? It comes on time.
Noon.
Noon?
Schedule at 12:15, but usually it's noon.
How's 1 p.m. on July 2?
Mhm.
I think I land in Traverse City at 12:30.
12:30.
So I can come directly here,
Did we say about 2?
yeah, 2 o'clock.
Second.
What time do you land in Traverse City?
12:30.
Oh, I thought you said 1:30.
I'm gonna put the flashers on, Karen.
Okay, old business. Barry?
Get my report for a reason.
Oh, no, I didn't. You know, I tell you what I did. I wrote the time, 2 PM on July 2,
On
next to the
that line.
director's report, and my eyes are failing me, so my apologies. As you can see, that
So, no accidents or incidents to report for the month. So GSA lease, so last month you approved the novation agreement, that was signed by the county and the authority and GSA. They now need a resolution, yes.
Thank you.
They need some sort of formal document, as to who the signatory is on behalf of the authority for their lease. I've tried to get them what exactly they want, and they won't commit, they just say some sort of document that says who's authorized to sign. So, my recommendation, if the board could pass a resolution that basically says the board chair is authorized to sign documents on behalf of the authority, I can give that to them, and I think that will be the last documentation they need to renew this lease.
You have a standard resolution format?
We don't. Very rare that we've done a resolution.
Contact Lisa. They might have something for you.
So, what do we,
So you need a resolution.
I need some sort of formal document that I can hand to GSA that says who is authorized, so that they can create the lease with a line that says the name on it, basically.
Do we need to look at that document before we make that resolution? Or can we make a verbal?
Well, I explained to them our process is, give us a lease, we'll review it, the board will approve it and say who's authorized to sign it. And they said, no, we can't create the document until we know who's going to sign it.
great.
That's not the way we work, but it's the federal government.
So then, should we have, a vote here for the chairman to sign it, and, we'll get our draft language from the county, and then we can submit that resolution that authorizes the chair to sign it, and then they'll give us the paperwork?
That, yes, that is
Okay,
what I'm thinking is the best process.
sounds good. How about a motion? Cindy, are you?
I will make a motion to have the, papers signed.
To have a resolution for the board.
Authorizing me to sign.
Authorizing you to sign, yeah.
Got that, Lindsay?
I'll support.
State that again for me, please.
Adopting a resolution for the chairman to sign.
The TSA space lease.
Typically, you
GSA.
have the resolution in front of you to approve, but we'll go
Subject
with
to
the
attorney,
standard.
review.
Yeah, you never know what's, but, I think the standard that we have at the county,
Yeah.
knowing that we follow that.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
You probably, if
We
it's
need a
a
roll call.
resolution, it should be a roll call.
All right, how about a roll call, Lindsay?
Mr. Adam Dotz?
Sure. Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky?
Yes.
Mr. Picardi?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The continuing saga of our new security system, I been reporting the last couple months that the security contractor and our door contractor needed to get together to figure out how something was gonna work. They finally had done that, and the resolution of that is that our front door is missing a component, a locking mechanism that needs to get installed to finish the project. So I've authorized them to move forward with that. They're procuring that part. When it gets here, gets installed, that project should finally be completed. I mentioned this last month, the future of EAS and how the president's draft budget, initially had some scary language in it. That's been followed up now with actual detailed proposed budget. And again, what comes out of the president's office is kind of not necessarily reflective of what Congress does, but it does show certain pressures that are out there. And the specifics of how the administration is recommending changes to EAS with the goal of shrinking it. So no one is using the terminology to eliminate EAS, because that's too politically hot potato. Now they're talking about shrinking it, controlling its costs. What the proposal that came out of there said that it eliminates EAS if you're within so many miles of a medium or a small, medium, or large hub. So it would eliminate EAS at Muskegon because of their proximity to Grand Rapids. We, because of our distance from Grand Rapids, would not be impacted under that language. But the proposal is reducing the subsidy cap, which is now, I think, at $550 per passenger, down to $350. We are at that threshold. For our current agreement with Contour, we need 10,000 employments to be under that $350. And right now, I'm not projecting we'll quite hit that this year, but so we're within the ballpark of that. So they're trying to bring thresholds and constraints down that put us on, the borderline. Another proposed change is that if you ever fall below these thresholds, you are eliminated forever. There's no waivers. So, trying to restrict things and kick people out over time and reduce the size of it. What ultimately happens, who knows, but I just want you aware that there are pressures out there, and where we are, we're not in the safest position given our size and our financial requirements.
So as we plan ahead, and all these additions and all this stuff, you have to think, but will the carpet be
Our
rolled out?
best laid plans could be.
But the opposite is if we aren't growing, then we're also so there's, it's both sides of that double-edged coin. The last thing is I've had interaction.
Just a question?
Yep.
Okay. Muskegon, wiped out. What happens with all their stuff? I mean, big yard sale? Thinking,
Well, yeah.
Potentially, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
fire trucks, plows, yeah, that would, yeah.
Do they have a fuel truck?
Yeah, good,
Yeah.
good.
The FBO would probably, because they have a
Oh, they've got
third-party
an FBO, yeah.
so they've got enough jet service that
Yeah.
that probably would still be viable without the airline. I've had interactions with my airport inspector. Our inspections generally happen in the summer. When I talked with him, he said this year they're looking at August, and I said, if you could, given the timeline for our new director employment of September 1st, I said, September date would be better, because then the new director could sit through that inspection and kind of observe, even though he wouldn't have been responsible for any of it, he'd at least be much better prepared a year from now when his first inspection would be there. So they're looking at schedules, nothing's set yet as far as our inspection.
So the shrinking of the FAA, is this part of that too?
No.
Time constraints, okay.
No, because these dates are set in actually legislation. It's like airports must be inspected in certain time periods, so they've got to find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, but I could say right
Adam already gave the whole enterprise update, so nothing to talk about there. On the employment, last month, May, Contour did very well, 1,359 passengers, which a 40+% increase over last year. So they did well on the numbers. On the performance, as of the end of May, that was 3 full months of no cancellations. Later, I will have a comment on my report that we're almost 4 months with no cancellations, because their last cancellations, I believe, was February 22nd, and we're almost to the 22nd. But then last night's flight got canceled, so so my report is already out of date. Contour canceled last night. So they are doing really well not canceling flights, but their delays are still an issue. They made some progress coming out of winter, but they've kind of now leveled off, and we still get 1-star reviews of the airport, because people don't know the difference between the airport and the airline, complaining vehemently about how poor Contour service is, and it stems from Friday. Their 1 p.m. flight left at 9 p.m. They had people sitting in the terminal for 8 hours. Their people didn't know what was going on. The people weren't given any updates. It was a poor situation. Saturday, I get a 1-star review.
They don't even, from what I understand, there is no posting view. They keep it on the board as still on time when they've been sitting there for 3 hours.
Right, and that's on the Chicago side, and
Yeah.
this side it's different, but yes, I mean,
Barry, have we, 2 things, so we could go on about
Yep.
how terrible it is. To correct it, are we still tracking creeping delays? And have we talked to them about what their issues are in Chicago? Because I don't surmise the issues are here in Manistee.
they have not been here in Manistee, correct? So, yes, we're tracking that, and it's coming up in a slide later.
What
that
about
shows-
communicating with them?
I had thought things were getting better, but then this weekend, both Friday and then last night,
Well,
we now have issues again.
so
So
is that isolated, or are there
I don't know.
a lot of,
It's so recent that I have not had an ability to follow up on it.
don't know. Let's set aside yesterday and the
Yep.
recent things, and just talk about the amount of delays over the last 3-4 months. How are they on delays? Creeping delays over 2 hours over the last few months.
Well, you
So that's
have,
the next thing.
yeah, you have on time stuff, yeah. But I'd also wonder,
So the average delay is roughly flat. The number of delays, March was higher, April and May have been flat. You know, the number of long delays, greater than 2 hours that last, May saw an uptick versus April, which was an improvement. But May didn't have a 9-hour delay. Its max was 5 hours.
So
They've gotten better over March. April,
March was
May are
bad.
almost
it
exactly.
was 13 and 11. 25, so about a quarter of their flights, 25 to 30% are delayed over an hour. 31 minutes or more. If I just take the bottom, 7.5 and 10 is 27,
More than half an hour.
41. And then in April, 11, 16, and 7's 23, so there's, call it a quarter. And then in May, 7, 7's 14, there's another quarter.
Yep.
Okay, so over the last 3 months, we see a quarter of their flights are delayed. My question is the Manistee Airport communicating with somebody at Contour to say, what's going on, guys, because a quarter of delayed flights, 31 minutes or more, isn't good. Can you report to us and tell us what you're doing to reduce that?
Well, that would be my question first, is like, what's causing these delays?
Right.
I wanna, what's the list? We don't have somebody manning a desk or something, or whatever.
So I'm asking, maybe Barry's been in
Yeah,
touch
is
and he
it
can share.
maintenance issue?
No, I have not, because I started tracking this 3 months ago. There was significant improvement from March to April. Now that's leveled off. So this is really the first period of basically saying, okay, as Ben Munson was here at March, I think, February, March, and basically said, these are the things we're doing to improve things. We started seeing improvements. Now it's leveled off.
And
So
again,
now is the time to,
this is on in a period of time where there's been significant changes going on in airline services. So if we know that some of this delays are caused by the fact they don't have enough whatever, traffic officer, whatever, we can better advocate, because Contour is doing what they can do. But if we jump on board with them and say, hey, everything's down there in Chicago because they don't have this, this, or this. Having a better idea of exactly what's going on helps.
But I think Contour needs to communicate to their customers.
Yeah, well, that's another piece.
I flew the other day and there was an hour delay and I got bombarded every 15 minutes what was going on.
Well,
so there's.
At least you know where you're at.
There's two
Everybody
aspects.
knows
One
what's
is, what is
delayed.
causing the delays,
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure-wise? And then when issues happen, and there's always gonna be cases where there's gonna be some issues,
Absolutely.
why is communication poor and not improving, such that people get honestly very frustrated?
Well, let's play this out. Just human behavior. You're waiting around 9 hours. Y'all get on the plane, you land in Manistee, and we're like, oh, the lucky winner is, and there's gonna be 29 other people pissed,
Not about
because
me.
it's like, I waited 9 hours as well.
so,
So these are the things that are gonna
Human nature.
blow up in our face.
so Robin Hogan, who many of you may know, had a post on Facebook. And it was very, I think, objective, there, wasn't throwing him under the bus. In fact, she said she really wanted it to work, but, some communication issues. And so I took her post and I sent it to Matt Chaffetz and, Ben Munson. And my email to them was, Robin just retired as a partner of a large insurance company in the area. I understand circumstances relating to American Airlines, weather, and other matters beyond Contour's control, but please continue to work on communicating with customers and assisting them to make alternate arrangements. Our board vice chair was also on this flight and indicated communication was sparse. And actually, I think communication was probably regular, but details and reasons were sparse. Thank you for your attentiveness to the issues I've shared over the recent months. I do very much appreciate our partnership and strong working relationship. I do believe that Contour's success is Manistee's success, and we'll help you however we can. So, at 12:30 in the morning on Saturday, Ben Munson replied to that email. They said there were two issues, one being relative to American Airlines and gate assignment. The plane was late to come in and couldn't get a gate. And I think gate assignments are probably, a struggle for any, what I'll call junior airline, whether you're Contour, Cape Air, Denver Air, on down the line. They probably don't have preference at O'Hare to United and American, but nonetheless, an issue they need to work with. The second was a mechanical, issue that, you know, they just, for whatever reason, couldn't get mechanical addressed. What I will say is, you know, I've reached out to, Matt probably a half dozen times since they've started, some of which when I'm on the plane in Chicago. And every time, he has gotten back to me within 5 minutes, and he's acutely aware of whatever it is, much to my surprise. I mean, he's very hands-on. I've expressed to him that, you know, the customer really doesn't care. They just want to get where they're going, and they really don't care if it's a gate issue, an American Airlines issue, a mechanic issue. There's, you know, so, there's kind of both sides to the coin. I do believe that they're aware of their problems. Their heads aren't buried in the sand. I do believe they are diligently working on them. You know, when you got concert tickets at Interlochen, it doesn't help you get to the show.
What I believe they are working on, my experience has been in my communication is they're aware of issues that are causing delays, and they're working to address those, whether those be American issues, all of those things. Whether they be maintenance issues. We've got more maintenance staff here now than we did at the beginning of this project. I don't, however, though, see communication, concrete steps on improving that. You know, again, I call it these rolling delays. Oh, you know, it's delayed because lack of gate in Chicago. Okay, we think, you know, an hour or so. When that turns into 8 hours, and it's in generally, you know, other airlines, if after 4 hours your flight hasn't gone, it's usually canceled at that point, or you're reaccommodated, or told, you need to look at other options. This may still go on, but, you know, after 4 hours, Contour doesn't do that. They don't proactively tell people, we don't know, you should look for other alternatives. You know, we could book you out of Traverse City, but you gotta get up there, et cetera, et cetera.
So I think it would be real helpful to us if, you know, in my email to them, I said, are you assisting with alternative arrangements?
At a certain period of time.
Yeah, exactly. I think that what we should do is send a letter to them and specifically ask, if it's industry standard, after 4 hours, would you please proactively work to accommodate others? Or some constructive, measurable things. You know, I chewed on them about alerts and communication, and now every creeping delay, you know, I think, Dylan, you got a text message that said it's in another hour, it's in another hour. So their communication is great, the result isn't improved, but, you know, if we could say, hey, you know, I think Robin would have loved to fly in to Traverse City and got a rental car and made it to the concert on time. So can we come up with some objective requests to put out to the airline? And Cindy, you know, you're in the business, Barry, you know customary practices.
But I think certainly on our end, when we've got people that are waiting 8 hours to leave Manistee, they're going to Chicago. Chances are most of them are getting on another plane to go somewhere else. It's
Half,
so,
in general, half.
yeah. But, you know, the people that were delayed on Friday with me, I mean, were upset because they couldn't get to Interlochen or they couldn't make their afternoon
So you were
time at
coming up
Arcade. Yeah.
on that? Okay. I
And
only
so-
saw what was happening here, so.
Well, yeah, well, so our plane couldn't get out, and then people that started to show up to the gate to go to West Virginia from Chicago couldn't get out because our plane is the one that's gonna take them to West Virginia. So operationally, it screws everything up. It's not a personal knock on the leadership or Contour, but their structure is not incentivized for them to cancel, because whether that plane shows up 12 hours late or right on time, they're still gonna get 85-90% of the fare.
Yes.
And so,
They are.
I got
finan-
refunded, but they're not, they're not really incentivized to
They're
get here on
financially
time.
motivated to make that flight happen any delay.
No matter what.
Because they get paid 100%, whether it's on time or 12 hours delayed.
Yeah.
That's the nature of
That
how
industry.
EAS works.
That would be Contour, Cape Air, Denver Air.
Yep.
That's not swap this guy out and put a new one in.
Correct.
That's the EAS program.
That's how EAS compensates. It's on completions, not on on-time performance.
I mean, to your point, if we're offering alternative transportation 4 hours later, we've already kind of lost that customer, in my opinion.
I somewhat disagree, because Cape Air they had cancellations, they had delays, they had all these issues. In 4 years, I never got a single one-star review, because they would go out of their way to make sure that that person flew out of Traverse City or Grand Rapids. And yes, is it an inconvenience? Sure, but at least the airline appeared
To care.
care and to try to do something. And because issues happen, mechanical issues happen, it's really this appearance that they don't care. We don't know when it's gonna get fixed, and we're not gonna proactively try to help you. That comes across as cold. And I think that's how I see it.
We had this conversation, I think, a month or two ago, and the problem was that, well, you can't get a taxi or 2 taxis to take care of all your customers that are stranded in Manistee. I mean, you're now talking a bus, so that's the issue.
You can't do what Cape Air did.
Right.
But you can give that person an option. You can jump in the car, drive to Traverse City, you're on this flight.
Yeah.
Which is how every other airline, every airline has, I've lived through my own travel issues on every airline, whether it be American, United, et cetera, where I've spent overnights in airports that I didn't intend to. That happens. And no other airline is gonna provide you transportation to an alternate airport. You gotta figure out how to get there, but you've got a flight. Does that work for everybody? No, but it works for enough people, and it makes.
It's a demonstration of care.
Correct.
So, I guess what I'd like to do is, can we take some action of this board and make a request of Contour? Barry is 4 hours, the industry standard. I'd like to make a specific request so that we can tell our community members, hey, we understand there's some delays, we understand X, Y, and Z, we've asked them to communicate, they did get better with their text messaging, I think they did that, but at a certain point, now we're going back and we're making additional requests. At 4 hours, would they proactively, not reactively upon request, but proactively offer to rebook out of Traverse City or Grand Rapids? What can we do about it? Now, I don't know that they're gonna agree to it, but at least we can say, we did something around this table. So, table, what would we like to do?
Is Enterprise gonna offer one-way rentals?
Well,
That's a serious question, that's what I drove.
well, my serious response to that, Dylan, is if you're here, drive your car to Traverse City if they rebook you.
Sure.
Now I pay that cost for keeping
Well,
away.
I don't know that we're ever gonna find a perfect outcome. What we're trying to do is make incremental progress.
But I also heard that, they're never gonna cancel. We just are asking for a threshold. We're gonna start telling people, go somewhere else.
I would say it differently than that. I would say, we are gonna come up with a threshold where they will proactively offer a rebooking.
will they still get, they're gonna bring that plane in, but they're still gonna get 100%,
Yeah, if that.
even if somebody else is rebooked?
Doesn't
that's
matter
fine.
about
With
riders.
0 passengers on it, they still get paid the same amount.
Well, look, we're not gonna change federal EAS policy.
No, I'm not asking that, I think the response is gonna be different. If they would lose that, I'm certain they would.
They would lose the passenger revenue, because that would then
They
go
have to pay the
to
other
somebody else, so they're not gonna get what the passenger pays. But,
Still got their big payment.
you know, that's, the trade-off is, poor customer service has revenue implications in the long term. And we have to balance that against short-term costs too.
The only thing we're in control of is this board,
Yep.
not how much they get paid, when they get paid, what the federal government is, or anything else. All I'm asking the board is, I hear from our community members and Contour's customers, there's an issue. And I'm asking this board, what would we like to put in writing as a board and make a request of Contour that we think is reasonable? So,
I think what you're outlining is a reasonable request. There's a part of me that says Contour serves 25 communities. Our issues are not unique. Why don't they see this as a priority on their side? And if they don't see this as a priority, is our effort gonna make a difference? I don't know the answer to that, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It just bugs me that they don't see this as a priority. So yes, I agree with you, we should do that and roughly make those recommendations.
are there any other specific things we'd like to include in the letter? Cindy, you're a travel agent, what do you think would be a good idea?
Well, I definitely think they need to start considering rebooking people.
At 4 hours? At what?
Is that too long? Why not 2 hours?
Well, what's the industry standard?
Well,
Okay.
So, first of all, you need to know what's the reason that you're so delayed. Because if it's their fault, they need to accommodate you.
That's right.
By law, they have to accommodate you. If it's an act of God like weather, they can try to assist you, but you may need to just wait. But regardless, if you have a connecting flight from Manistee on, they need to figure out how to get you to your final destination. They can't just say, well, I hope when you get to the airport you can find a flight. I hope they're not doing that.
The difference is they're not being proactive. So if people go to them, and by go to them, it means call their 800 number, because they're not really trained to accommodate people here at the staff to do that in general.
And that's a problem, I think. That's a
You call
problem.
the 800 number and
Trained
explain,
to
and
rebook.
they generally will reaccommodate you. But it's, the passenger has to be savvy to know what to ask for. They're not being proactive in trying to.
Should the Manistee Airport put a sign up of passengers' rights? I mean, really, what's really at the heart of this is, what actionable, instead of chewing the fat for 15 minutes, what do we wanna do to help our customers?
Well, I think in the letter, it should be, can we train the employees
Yes.
at the Manistee Airport to accommodate?
They
That's
need to be able to, I mean, if you're at the airport, I mean, that's just like any other place I've ever flown. If I have an issue, that gate person or the counter person can help you get to your final destination or rebook you or what needs to be done. If they're not doing that here, that's a problem, in my eyes, that's a problem. Because you're at the airport, they should be able to help you. You shouldn't have to now get on your phone and try to get through 50 other people out there.
Sure, they've got access to every flight in the world out there.
So they should be able to
Yeah.
accommodate.
Exactly. Communication is huge, so that's probably the biggest thing. Whether
No,
you're telling the people 2 hours, 3 hours, helping them do something, yeah.
If I can just, and Cindy will probably understand this, but it's a minor thing, but it depends on where you do book, though. So if you book on Priceline, no one can help you, you've got to call Priceline. And I hear that all the time, is the people on Friday sitting right out inside my office was like, he was on the phone with Priceline, and they couldn't figure out Contour.
They're awful.
But Contour told them, we can't help you. Because you booked through a third party, we don't actually have access to that ticket. So,
They could still buy them another ticket.
that,
I mean, it's customer service, but also they need to have some skin in the game too. If they're spending money to reaccommodate, they might go, oh, this isn't too economical.
in general, you should book either through Contour or through the major carrier directly. Booking through third parties opens up all sorts of challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
But, you know, that still doesn't detract from what should happen for the majority of cases.
yeah, and I agree to what you're saying, which is something they just started recently, because actually, even if I booked a package where to your final destination, you're getting a hotel and car rental, and I do it all in one big package. So now that package company that I booked with, whether it's Apple Vacations, United Vacations, American Airlines Vacations, that airline still have the right to go in and change and do what they had to, because they're now at fault. So I don't understand why they keep saying you have to call Priceline, you have to call American Airlines, you need to call whatever. I still have a struggle with that, and that just started in the last couple of years. But I will say 90% of the time out of Manistee, I will book directly with United or American if they got a connection. Just because it
It's
will be
easier.
easier. Yeah, yeah.
Well, and, really when we look at the numbers on the board, if we said the industry standard is to rebook you in 4 hours, if you have a creeping delay, you get a text every hour, another hour. You go back to it.
I realized we were seeing the same thing.
Well, what it is like single-digit percent is over 2 hours. So really, out of all the people you touch, we're talking about 1 in 10, or 2 in 10 people that would get the benefit of this action.
I guess one of my questions to Contour is, if you're being delayed, you already know it's gonna be a minimum of 2 hours, and people have connections, are they on it? Are they looking at those connections to give people another flight?
I believe the answer is no.
So, and that's,
It's on the customer.
I don't know how they're gonna do that, 'cause Contour is Contour, they're not connecting you and flying you to Washington. They're just getting you to Chicago. So they're not
Yes, but
gonna
if
see
it's
your
an
connection
all-the-way
with
through
United.
connection with United or American,
They can
That's
see,
their
they can see
affiliate.
that,
they can see that ticket, that
they can see
connection,
that, and they should be able
can-
to accommodate.
So I would say yes, that would be reasonable, that our
No.
people here should be,
I mean, people
Awesome.
shouldn't be like, okay, I'm missing my connection, what are you gonna do for me? I don't know.
Okay.
Call American or figure it out. I mean, that's just not even customer service right there, and that gets people frustrated, and that's where they're gonna say, I ain't never flying this airline again, because they can't even help me on a delay.
And what happens in Manistee is probably gonna be different from what happens in Chicago, because of the different ways Contour is handled, but.
They're being handled by Americans in Chicago.
Contour has hired a new staff person. They have a vice president of customer service now. Probably because Ben and Matt are sick of getting my calls. So they have a new, leadership position. And that lady will be here, this Friday.
Ah.
So, back to if we have some tangible requests, that would be a wonderful time to put them in writing and hand deliver them. So,
And I think we should just sit down and have a conversation with her,
perfect.
Mhm.
because in some ways, I don't know exactly what Contour is telling people. I hear second, third hand, what people think they were told. It'd be nice to hear what Contour's policy is in these scenarios. And, yeah, but,
Well, why don't we catch her?
Yeah.
After the ceremony, okay?
great.
And should we put something on record for a letter with a full bullet, a few bullet points on rebooking and proactive responsibly doing so.
My recommendation would be to have that conversation Friday, then write the letter based on having facts,
And follow up to it.
follow up.
Okay, sounds good. Well, Barry, on with the balance of your report?
Airfares. Here, it is a better situation than it was last month. We're not the most expensive airport, but, we are more expensive than Traverse City, and Grand Rapids prices dropped, a good chunk this month period. This is unusual because typically Traverse City's fares, this is for travel in July, fares in Traverse City usually go sky high in the summer. They're actually somewhat still reasonable this year. So we just kind of are at a kind of cost disadvantage right now for whatever reason. Traverse City is still being reasonable. It could just be the fact that they've got so much capacity being thrown into that market that, you know,
Competition.
yeah. When you include kind of our free parking, and that definitely offsets and, you know, levels the playing field significantly. So we're not in a bad situation, but we're not as good as it could be, and it certainly could be worse. Capital projects, I'm gonna try to quickly go through this because there's not really much update. In the capital projects committee meeting with Eden Hunt, that committee got a lot of details on some of where some of these things stand, like this bill funding that's still out there. We are hearing that it is now going to be released, but they're writing up the grant assurances that need to go with these grants that will come out, and that hasn't yet happened. And I want to remind that when we do this project, this safety area grading, our main runways, replacing its lights, there will be a 10 to 14 day closure of the airport, likely this fall, where all of Contour's flights are going to need to get canceled. I don't have dates for that yet. Therefore, we can't start that process, but just everyone be aware that when your main runway is closed that the airline needs, you can't operate flights. So that's unfortunate. This is likely the last project that will impact the runway for probably another 10 years. When we got it repaved 3 years ago, we had a similar situation. This is the lighting, and we should be good for 10 years. But every so often, you have those issues. We've already killed this, but I'll talk on the positive side. So May passenger numbers were 46% up. Year to date, we're now 34% up. We need 40% growth for the year to reach 10,000. My current projections have us coming in about 9,400, so just shy of 10,000. I think there's some upside there, but it's a stretch for me to believe that we'll hit 10,000 this calendar year. Bookings are doing very well for summer, so, you know, month-over-month bookings, kind of what our pipeline is. I guess this last column, can't highlight the column, but this kind of is just a total number that kind of shows your pipeline and kind of where you are. Back in March, we were down versus previous year 3%. April 1st, we were up 1%. May 1st, we're up 11%. June 1st, we're up 19%. July 1st will be higher than 19%. So everything is coming together for a very robust summer. So those are all ones to be seen. When Contour operates correctly, it's the best service in the world. It's just when they don't that we have these problems. Last 4 weeks, the highest booking rate since 2011. Kind of historically, what our peak is, it's been May or July. We're in June now and still seeing, very high numbers. So again, Contour is doing very well as it relates to the summer's capacity. I showed this same number last month. There's nothing new here, but I'm projecting around 2,600 total passengers in each July and August, which is a 70% load factor. I think there's some upside on that. And just for comparison, what we had in 2011 with Frontier were the mid-70s number.
80% load factors essentially full.
Given the frequency with 2 flights a day and, you know, the fact you're flying Tuesdays and Saturdays, which have lower demand, yes.
So we're not far off full.
My opinion is that by the time Contour is done with their 3-year contract, so this is their first summer, actually I would say after their second summer, we will be at capacity for summer. And something the board will need to think about is post-Contour, how do we get more capacity? Because we will be restricting our market in the summer by the time Contour's contract is up. Good problems. That's all we've been talking about. Adam already talked about this Friday, and, you know, we're making tweaks and adjustments to our online digital spend as needed. Fran and I just had a meeting last week where we're reducing our Google search because it's not being effective in how Google wants us to spend our money. So, moving that over to display advertising instead of search advertising. That's all I have on my report.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barry.
Any questions for Barry on that? Okay. Anything in the old business? New business? Looks like we already took care of that.
Did number one.
Air service grant?
So I talked in detail about this last month. This is the actual paperwork for that grant that I had mentioned last month that we were awarded. We just hadn't received the documentation yet. So this is now for the board's approval. This is a $200,000 grant with the anticipation of it being used next summer, along the lines of the proposal that we submitted that I talked to the board through the spring on.
Is the milk run?
Yes. So it's $200,000 to Muskegon, $200,000 to Manistee for this project.
And Milwaukee and Green Bay were also awarded?
It's a Michigan program, so the service would be connecting those, but it's Muskegon and Manistee that are basically making that happen.
As long as Muskegon's open.
Green Bay has agreed to contributing incentives, marketing incentives, and other dollars to the program. Milwaukee's non-committal at this point. So I request the board's approval of this grant and authorize, I believe, I should be the one signing this just because of they require digital signatures and I have the account for that.
This is a 100% grant?
Huh? Yes.
Is there any more for it?
No, there's,
Okay, so we have a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve that grant
Thanks, George.
for the,
Thanks, Cindy. Okay,
Mr. Prescott? Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
yes.
Ms. Goodman? Ms. Kaminsky?
Yes.
Mr. Pete Cardy?
Yes.
okay. Airport director hiring process. Gary.
so at the Capital Projects Committee meeting, Lisa Segala was there, and Karen and Lisa were having a conversation about, basically, what is the process going to be for this board? Review resumes, interview, what's the process going to be? So I was kind of asked to put this on the agenda since our window of submitting closed yesterday. So we now have 15 resumes that need to be reviewed and a process to be followed to move down hiring a new director.
Well, Barry, thank you. Why don't we go back to our schedule, and instead of meeting on July 2, to review these, let's do it sooner.
So you're saying that the process will be the transition committee does this?
Well, let's talk about it. If,
The reason it was brought up is that, talked with Lisa, that maybe our HR department help you through the process.
that'd be wonderful.
Do the first go around and say, hey, you know, this person, based on what this board wants, this one doesn't make the cut. I mean, you know, out of 15, maybe there's whittled down to 5, you know, do the first round of interviews.
Appropriate questions to ask and not inappropriate questions you
Yes,
can
yes, yes.
So I think that's a great suggestion to incorporate the, HR expertise and resources from the county, but I think we maybe should have some, airport authority involvement in that, because while they know not to ask them their sexual orientation or age
Oh, I'm not
or
saying they're gonna do
any
the
of those
interview.
sorts of things.
No.
Well, they wouldn't do the interview, they
saying
would
that.
just like, you set up like,
Guidelines.
some guidelines, like, these are like some questions, you know, what are your expectations out of this person, you know? Do you wanna do like a grading scale, like, what experience do they have, 1, 2, 3, or 5? So
Well, is
if
there
someone
some
has a 4 or
value
5,
And having the county's HR person be present with us?
It can, I mean.
yeah,
most
or just
times-
meet with her and like, she can go over some things with you and help you with that process, and then like, you know, these are your 15 goals that you want from that person, you know, what questions can you ask that person for these 15 goals? Are you gonna do it on a rating scale? Would you base that off of their experience of like 1 to 5? And so then like whoever is interviewing those people, they'll each have that, and then you guys can go back and discuss. You'll have something, and like you can make notes on it or whatever, and then as a group, you can go back and discuss your, you know, why did this person give them a 5 versus this person gave them a 3? Or, you know, what did you specifically, you know what I mean? It's
Or
just,
even have
it's
the
just a-
questions be
yeah.
exactly the same when
Right.
you're interviewing.
yes,
So that, you know, again.
following the same protocol.
Completely
format.
uniform for every.
Right, yes, yeah.
Okay, so it
Yep.
sounds like maybe should the transition committee first meet with this gal, what's her name? Is that-
Julie Griffith?
Julie? Should we huddle up with her first?
I would call Lisa and first confirm, and then follow up with Julie. Just put Lisa in that loop on that.
Okay.
Call for Lisa probably tomorrow afternoon. She's out today and board meeting tomorrow morning.
Okay. So we'll talk to Lisa tomorrow afternoon. We can meet with Julie thereafter about the week of the 23rd. Was, George and Dylan
I'm gonna be out of town,
in?
but I can participate.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a day that's better for you than another?
Probably Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday,
Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday?
and I will be on Pacific time.
George?
Wednesday or Thursday, that would be.
All right, let's zero in on Wednesday, the 25th. And, 9 Pacific is noon Eastern, 10, what, do you know your schedule on Wednesday?
9 a.m. Wednesday would be good.
Okay. Well, how about noon Eastern?
Very good.
9 Pacific, Wednesday, 25th. check with Julie to see if that works with her.
Griffiths.
Griffiths? A little bit like my dad here, I can't hear. Ever.
So I'll, send an email to all of those that have submitted, let them know that we're putting together a process and not to expect to hear something until towards the end of the month.
Thank you very much.
That would be great.
That sounds reasonable?
Yep, very reasonable, thank you.
I would say something like, we are initiating our process and starting our reviews, and we will have more
Yeah,
forward
I would word it.
finalization, yeah.
Yeah,
Just
but
so
I just
that
want.
we don't sound like we're just putting it together now.
Yes, no, but I just wanna give them a time frame so that they're not wondering, why haven't I heard anything yet? 'Cause
That's perfect.
I've already had people ask me, why haven't I heard anything yet? We haven't even closed the window yet, so.
Yeah.
so.
Okay, watch the meetings.
Great. All right. Anything else on?
I guess I would have a recommendation that at some point in this process, that Mead and Hunt be asked to join us. I don't think too early, but maybe like for the final interviews, to see if they have anything to catch, from an industry perspective that we might be lacking.
Well, Barry, I think that's a great suggestion, but what I would add to it is, if we're gonna come up with a uniform list of questions, I would submit those to Mead and Hunt to say, is there anything
Well, that makes sense.
we
Yeah.
missed? Because I would not wanna go through the entire process not
I just-
knowing what Mead and Hunt would say.
I just know that we can ask them certain things, but at some point it starts costing us, and therefore I want to be not trying to spend money we don't really have, so. But that does make sense for them to review certain things.
And
One person,
it's okay for
reviews
them to maybe be
do a team review.
in attendance, but I would not want them
Talking.
asking. Yeah.
But, yep.
Okay. Anything else on director hiring? Comments by board members?
No.
Karen? Dylan, or,
Dylan?
Dylan? Dylan?
Yeah, last week, I flew out, of the airport, with the privilege of going on our corporate jet. And, I wanna say that our FBO services and airport services here were really great. And so I just wanted to compliment and, say that the taxiway was a very smooth part of the ride. So.
We probably make it another year.
For, numbers purposes, the Department of Transportation considers 3 hours significant delay. That's what triggers federal, guidelines.
Thank you. Okay. Well, to adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
No one's gonna go back, because I have to take my lunch